We started a study last week in conjunction with the upcoming one-year anniversary of Celebrate Recovery as a ministry to our church into the larger community of San Antonio. And the goal of Celebrate Recovery is helping people to overcome hurts that come into their lives or the hang-ups that bring pain into their life and the lives of those around us, and the bad habits that continually sabotage us. Now, modifying the 12-step program, which is a gospel-based way of life or a gospel-based way of living, into 8 choices, Celebrate Recovery teaches the importance of reconnecting to God. The importance of reconnecting to God and to God's grace in order to heal our inner lives. And then number 2, how to make choices every day that lead to a Christ-like character, and then how that life can be shared with other people who are having the same kinds of struggles in life or finding, those same hurts and hang-ups and bad habits that are kind of holding them back. Now, I want to begin this morning by telling a parable or a story that helps us to kind of connect with where all of this is going to be going this morning. And it's a story that, once upon a time, there is a skylark, a bird who loved to eat worms and would do anything to get them. And one day she was singing in the sky when she looked down and she sees a tiny man in a coach, and he's shouting, "Who will buy my worms? Who will buy my worms? 2 juicy worms for a feather. Who wants to buy my worms?" Well, this was a deal that's just too good to pass up. And so she flies down, she lands, she yanks a feather out from underneath her wing, gives it to the man, and she says, 2, please. This went on day after day, eating worms to her heart's delight and only sacrificing 1 feather a day. It was a great deal until it wasn't. Through space and time, the little skylark discovered she was having trouble flying as she once did. And then one day, she leaped up to join the other skylarks, singing joyfully in the sky. But instead of flying, she fell flat on her face. The consequences of plucking feathers daily for 2 juicy worms was now undeniable. She lost her ability to fly due to the loss of feathers all over her body. But she came up with a plan. She would hunt and gather worms in order to buy back her feathers. And that she did. And she got a ton of worms. And she found the man and made her offer. But the man said, "I sell worms for feathers, sweetie, not feathers for worms." And the sorry end of it was that the skylark lost her wings, the ability to fly, and the desire to sing. And last of all, she died, leaving nothing but a little heap of dust on the earth that she had exchanged for the blue sky of heaven. That little parable is over 100 years old. Through my years in ministry, I have come to believe that there are 3 really important, pivotal moments in the life of every person. The first pivotal moment is when you realize just how valuable and just how precious and worthwhile your one and only life is. That your life matters to God and it matters to others. And we are reminded that God the Son in love went to the cross in order to open up a passageway in the blockade, in order for our lives to find its way back into the presence of God. That God the Father in love has not given up on you, and not only has He not given up on you, and He wants you back. And not only does He want you back in His presence, but He wants you back in a special kind of a relationship. He wants you back as a daughter. He wants you back as a son. He wants you back as a child. And this is what John is trying to write as he writes in a letter to the church in general, in Asia Minor, at the end of the Christian scriptures. John writes, open your eyes. Open your eyes and look, take it in. See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called the children of God. That we are the children of God. That we are the children of God. And that is what we are. In fact, I want you to say that last sentence with me. And that is what we are. You're a child of God. Say it again. And that is what we are. Well, that's the first pivotal moment. The second pivotal moment is when we realize how adept, how capable, how talented and gifted we are at messing up our life when God is not in control of that life. It's that moment when we realize that, it's not doing any good, and maybe we should stop shouting at people, "Don't you know who I think I am?" I love this quote from A.W. Tozer. He says, the reason why so many are troubled, still seeking, still making little progress, is because they have not come to the end of themselves. We're still trying to give orders. We're still trying to give orders and interfering with God's work within us. Our foundational passage, Matthew chapter 5, verse 3, the first of the Beatitudes, we know what it says, right? Or excuse me, we're going to go to Proverbs. Solomon, one of the wisest men who ever lived, says this: there is a way that seems right to a man. It just seems right. It just seems the right path. But in the end, it leads to what? The reality that we have to wrap our minds and arms around is this: that the world is broken and all humans are broken, that God is loving and powerful. The world is broken, human beings are broken, I'm broken, but God is loving and powerful. Therefore, because God is loving and powerful, there is hope. And then the third pivotal moment is when we believe that God is our only hope. And so, as they say in a lot of meetings around the world in recovery, let go and let God. Let go and let God. There just comes a moment when you realize you've run out of ammo. That you cannot stop your self-defeating behaviors that are throwing your life against the wall again and again and again and again. And it's time to let go so that you don't keep getting dragged down the street again and again and again. There comes a point when the pain and the fears and the frustration of the hurts and those hang-ups and those bad habits outweigh the fear of change, and we're ready to say, I'm done giving feathers for worms. Your life may be out of control, but you are not beyond hope. And this is where we go back to that very first beatitude that Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount is telling to the entire world, and it's blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. There is hope. There's hope to getting unstuck. And as we saw last week, it begins with a moment of clarity. A moment of clarity where in Celebrate Recovery we would say it's choice one. It's where I admit that I am powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong. As much as I want to stop doing the wrong, it's the very thing I end up doing. And the very good thing I want to do is not the thing that I want to do. We talked about that out of Romans chapter 7. I admit that I am powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong and that my life is unmanageable. So I want to spend some time this morning talking about how do we get unstuck. And starting there, I want us to consider three actions. This morning, I want us to consider three actions for getting unstuck. And the first one is this. Let's just really understand the problem. Sin in a fallen world impacts everyone and it leaves a mark. Sin impacts everyone and it leaves a mark. It does. And on one end of the spectrum, or one end of the continuum, it's a general sense that we just don't belong, that we don't feel at home. That there's kind of this, as Ernst Becker would describe it, there's just this sense of a rumble of panic that's underneath everything. Not feeling at home in the world. Or there's the unresolved trauma from the past. That somehow it's not been resolved in a way that allows us to move forward in healthy ways. And there's this trauma in the past. It's unresolved, and because it's unresolved, it's still lingering, and it's affecting the way that we live, not only with ourselves and live in the world, but it affects every decision we make, and it begins to affect all of the relationships that we have. There are unfilled needs, unmet expectations. There is the inevitable grief from losses. There are experiences of failure and disappointment. And so the question we have to ask is this: what do we do with our pain? The pain that comes into our lives because we are a human being, because the world is broken, and because we are broken. What do we do with that pain? Well, one response, friends, to the pain alarm is to fight the fire on our own. We try to fix it ourselves. Which, is very understandable because we live in an age of DIY, do it yourself. Need to swap out a dishwasher? All you got to do is go down to Home Depot, go down to Lowe's, you buy a dishwasher, load in the back of the truck, get it into the kitchen, you open YouTube up on your smartphone, you watch a video. This is how you swap out a dishwasher. Then you watch it a second time. And then if you're me, you watch it a third time. And then you spend the rest of the day swapping out a dishwasher. The problem, though, is this: that it is so much easier to change out a dishwasher than to change a human heart. It's not the same. Our very human reaction is to fix the pain on our own with spiritual workarounds, that is, solutions without God, in order to make our life tolerable. We numb the pain with, the hits of pleasure. And that's when the trouble starts. Watching porn in the middle of the night while the family's in bed, or we become control freaks, or workaholics, or technology addicts, or we become addicted to alcohol or to drugs or gambling addictions, or we jump from one relationship to another relationship. I have a friend that one time I was sitting with her, and she was talking about her life and all of the different, she had been in and out of relationships and in and out of some marriages. And, her marriage was now ending, and she was already thinking about the next relationship. And I said, whoa, I think you're addicted to men. And she stopped, and she opened her eyes, and she said, I never thought about that. There are anger issues, sex addictions, social media addictions, shopaholics, spending addictions, fix other people addictions, approval junkies, adrenaline junkies, nicotine addicts, gaming addictions, the need to always be right compulsions, addiction to self-improvement. There's dieting addiction, exercise addictions, popularity addiction, fantasy junkies, tattoo addictions, compulsions to lie, compulsions to help other people, emotional eating, guilty, travel and vacation junkies. You get the idea. We're trading feathers for worms. And these spiritual workarounds block God's love. Hear me say that again. These spiritual workarounds block God's love and power from streaming into our lives and making a difference. Our attempts to eluding pain only going to usher in more experiences of pain. And even our attempts to our spiritual fixes are not really fixes, right? Well, I'll only gamble during football season. Or if I'm, I don't have a problem if I'm a success. Or, I'll get off social media for a month. Or, I won't get onto the computer after 5 p.m. We're thirsty, right? We're thirsty. But the problem is we have to stop drinking from the wrong water fountain. We have to stop drinking from the wrong well. And this is not modern, and this is not even American, it's not even Western. This is a problem that human beings have had since, there were human beings. Going, several hundred years into the history of Israel, there was a point in which the people of Israel that were reflecting God back into the world had become so lost that they were no longer reflecting God and God's love and God's mercy and God's grace back into the world. And Jeremiah, at the high point, at the zenith of how things were going wrong in the lives of the people of Israel, speaking for God, says, "My people have committed two sins." This is Jeremiah chapter 2. "They have forsaken me." They have forsaken me, the spring of living water. But what they've done instead is to dig their own cisterns, broken cisterns, that cannot hold water. The question was this, right? What do we do with our pain? Well, we are not the answer to that question. We are not the answer to that question. If we could solve our own problems, it wouldn't be a problem right now, right? But there is also a second way that we deal with the question, what do we do with the pain, that's equally rough on us? And that's to deny the pain. I mean, we try to fix it ourselves, or we go, pain? What pain? I'm not in pain. How dare you say I'm in pain? But what happens is the pain alarm goes off. We deny the pain. I don't hear anything going off. You must be crazy. And then the house burns down. We have to face denial and avoidance. Second action. We have to face denial and avoidance. There's an old story that goes, if one person says, "You look like a horse," ignore it. If two people say, "You look like a horse," better look in the mirror. And if three people say, "You look like a horse," you better buy a saddle. Many times, friends, when we come face to face with truths about ourselves, we will try to hide it or to hide from it. We avoid it, we deny it, we avoid dealing with it, and we can deny it until we can't deny it anymore. And it's right here that I want to give you kind of a working definition of addiction. And listen, addiction is, talking about it is a little tricky at times. There's all kinds of things that are involved. But a fellow by the name of Ian Cron, many of you know him from his podcast. He's written a book recently called The Fix, and this is his definition straight from that book, The Fix. An addiction, chemical or behavior, is any mood-altering compulsive behaviors we use to dull emotion, psychological and spiritual pain born of the trauma and spiritual homelessness we ultimately can't kick despite negative consequences. Our addictions are fueled by the mistaken belief that something outside of us can heal the pain inside of us. End of quote. An addiction is the way that we deal with pain or the fallout from pain on our own. The word addiction applies, friends, to more than just, the National Enquirer level of addiction. It's more than just chemicals. It can also be behavioral. And the fallout is not always big and it's not always visible, but know this, that addiction is the only disease that will tell you that you don't have a disease. Addiction is the only disease that will tell you that you don't have a disease. And this is where pain becomes a gift. This is where the pain can become a gift. Pain is the antidote to denial and avoidance. C.S. Lewis wrote a book decades and decades and decades ago at the death of his wife, and the title of the book is The Problem of Pain. And there's a passage where C.S. Lewis writes, that God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks to us in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. Pain is God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world. Pain removes the veil. It plants the flag of truth within the fortress of a rebel soul. End of quote. Now, for most people, Denial stops when there's one or more of three things. The first is a crisis. You're going along. You've denied, avoid, and then all of a sudden there's a crisis. There's something that's unexpected, something that's out of your control that happens, and you got to deal with it because the crisis is right there. You're forced to deal with it. Or there's a confrontation. Somebody comes up to you and says, you know what, you're blowing it. We call that an intervention. Think about 2 Samuel chapter 12. You know, David has really done a terrible thing with Bathsheba and has compounded it. And finally, in 2 Samuel chapter 12, Nathan has to go over to David and tell him a parable about a guy that had a sheep and lived next door to a rancher that had a ton of animals, and the rancher steals the one sheep. You know the story. And David just gets so upset that this guy with all the sheep takes the one sheep that this one guy has, and he's just furious, and there's got to be justice. And Nathan says, hey, you're the man. And David knew exactly what he was talking about. And it breaks him down. But he had to be confronted with what had happened with Bathsheba. They just compounded until it led to the murder of Uriah. And the worst thing is that David thought that he was hiding it. Or there's a catastrophe that takes place, a crisis, there's a confrontation, or there might be a catastrophe. And that's where God says, okay, you want to be me? Okay, have at it. And the next thing you know, we have run our life into a wall. We have to stop denying our issues. Just because our issues are not as big or as dramatic as something we see on the cover of the National Enquirer or we see in the TMZ podcast. I mean, think about it this way. Termites can destroy a house, just not as quickly or dramatically as a tornado. We all have to deal with what we have to deal with. And here we come to the second choice that is talked about in Celebrate Recovery, this gospel-based way of living. That we earnestly believe that God exists. That you matter to Him and He has the power to help you recover. For your life to blossom. For your life to stop being a wrecking ball, not only in your own life, but in the lives of those around you. The collateral damage sometimes is so great. But there is hope, and that hope is found in God, who has the power to grow you into the human being that you were always meant to be. And here's the third action. You got to go to God. Friends, I'm telling you right now, you have to go to God. As we said last week, one of the ways that this gets said is this way: I can't, God can, I think I'll let God. I can't. I'm done. I can't. I know I can't, but God can. I think I'm going to let God handle it. Your ultimate power, in other words, cannot be you. Your ultimate power cannot be you. You know, the best piece of advice that somebody gave Mark Absher one time was, hey, you know what, dude? You need to take off the cape. You're barely a man and you're not super. And he was right. You have to go to God to find healing. Now, a lot of people balk at that, right? Hey, I'm a good person. What do you mean I can't fix myself? Or what makes you think? This is the sad one for me, is when people say, why do you think that God would even want me to come back to Him? I know what I've done. I know who I am. I'm not denying that. But what makes you think that God would ever allow me back into His presence? In the reality statement, we're saying, yes, the world is broken and humans are broken. The evidence is ample. You know, I'm at that age, and many of you are too, that we can remember when there was only a couple of ways that you could listen to a song in your house. One was the radio. The other was this plastic vinyl disc that we called a record that, had songs on it. And you remember what you had to do, right? I mean, I think these things are coming back. But you get the record and you put it on the record player, and you put the needle on the arm on the record, and it would begin to play. unless they had a scratch on it. And so it would be, down in the West Texas town of El Paso, El Paso, El Paso, El Paso, El Paso. And nothing changed and nothing moved forward until you moved the needle, right? How many times have we just laid awake at night in our bed, staring at the ceiling, going, I did it again. I did it again. Why do I keep doing the same thing over and over and over again? I did it again. I did it again. I did it again. A working popular definition of insanity is this, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. The world is broken. Humans are broken. God is loving and powerful, though. He loves you, and He wants that great power in His love to come streaming into your life to bring that healing and to bring that change. Therefore, there is hope. And as I end this morning, I want to give you very quickly three quick truths about God. The first one is this: God knows what you're going through. God knows what you're going through. David will say in Psalm 37, I will be glad and rejoice in your love, for you what? You saw my affliction, and you what? Knew the anguish of my soul. Psalm 34, verse 18, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and He saves those who are crushed in spirit. Notice that it doesn't say those who are crushed by their sin, that too, but He also saves those who are crushed in spirit. Number two, God cares about you in what it is you're going through. He not only knows what you're going through, He cares about you in what you're going through. In Psalm 103, as a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear Him. Romans chapter 5, verse 8, very, very famous passage out of Paul's writing. But God is demonstrating, open your eyes, look, there's a demonstration. God is demonstrating His own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, while we were still far away, while we were alienated, while we were enemies in some of the older translations, Christ died for us. And then the third is that God wants to heal you in what you are going through. There are two famous prayers in Ephesians. One is found in Ephesians chapter 3, and that's the one that gets a lot of the publicity and a lot of talk and a lot of sermons. But the first one in Ephesians chapter 1 is a beautiful one, and I want to read just a portion of it. Paul says, I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened. That is, that your eyes are open, that you can see, in order that you may know. See, be enlightened, in order that you may know the hope to which He has called you, the riches of His glorious inheritance in His holy people, and His incomparably great power for us who believe. That power is the same as the mighty strength He exerted when He raised Christ from the dead. What's available for you is this: the power that literally brought Jesus from death to a never-ending life is the same power that is available for you wherever you are in life to bring you from death to life. Let's end by just 1 minute in Luke chapter 15. Last week we talked about the younger son. He's the one whose issues in life are visible for everyone to see. He's the one that everybody's talking about. He treats his father worse than dirt. He treats the father as if he's dead. Let me have the inheritance now. He puts the family resources in danger by taking the inheritance away and squandering it on wild living. His life is the one that gets published on the front page of the Village Neighborhood website. But the older son also has issues. In fact, the older son is the whole reason and main point of this parable. He doesn't appear to have issues, but he does. He is warped in his thinking and sense of moral superiority. He too, although it is not obvious to modern Western readers, is treating his Father with the same disdain. He makes the Father come out to him. Great sign of disrespect in the ancient Mediterranean world. Very disrespectful, very demeaning. He has a very twisted view of his Father. The Father is a withholder of good, unappreciative of the older brother's efforts. And Jesus' point is that both sons, that all the sons, that all the children have to come to their senses. All have to come to their senses and go back to God. Let's stand.